My name is Sari van Poelje. I run a business called Intact Academy, where we give coaching and consultancy programs to people who want to develop themselves as coaches and business coaches and team coaches. The other thing I do is I'm an agile business innovation designer. So I help businesses innovate their business more quickly than their products, so that they're always on time to market. One of the things we're talking about is using transactional analysis as a tool in change. And we talked about ego states and transactions and redefinitions and discounting and racketeering. And we're now going to talk about games, psychological games. Eric Berne, the founder of TA, wrote a book called Games People Play, and it was really, really popular. It was a kind of dictionary for all the ways in which people get into conflicts and don't get out of them, and so maintain their problems. A lot of what I'm talking about is how people actually stay with their story and stay in their problem instead of solving it. And he talked about games as a repetitive non-problem solving pattern of behavior that always ends with a known payoff. This is interesting. So it's unconscious as well. So it's not something people decide to do usually, unless you're a master manipulator. It's a non-problem solving pattern of behavior. What can you think of then? So it's like the discussions you have at home about who's going to take out the trash. So one of you goes, you know, it's your turn. And the other person goes, no, it's not. It's raining outside. It's not my turn. Then you go, listen, I cooked. It's really your turn. And they go, no. I don't know. I cleaned the shoes, whatever it is. And then you go, no, we've had this conversation before. We made a list about this. You know, it really is your turn. And then the other person goes, no, I do everything in this household. I shouldn't be taking out the trash as well. And then you go, if you really loved me, you take out the trash. And then suddenly your conversation is about, you know, the quality of your love and relationships and should you stay together, and everyone forgets the trash. People storm off. You storm off saying, nobody really loves me. And then the other person storms off and goes, I always have to do everything here. And then you're both in your corners repeating your own stories, but the trash is still in the house. You know, this is what we mean by a non-problem solving pattern of behavior. The last bit of the definition is ending in a known payoff, which that's a really interesting one, because Berne talked a lot about the patterns we're in. And in a previous talk, I talked about coaching as being an interrupter of patterns, the patterns that people get in, da 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 is like the bass tone in our life. And a game is a non-problem solving pattern ending in a known payoff. The known payoff is usually your favorite rotten feeling, which we call a racket feeling, plus your conclusions about yourself, your beliefs about yourself, others in the world. So as I said, after this discussion about the trash, one of them goes off and says, nobody really loves me. This is belief about self. Other people never do anything for me, belief about others. The world is a cruel place, belief about life or the world. How are you feeling? I feel sad, this. Then you go, okay, that's a racket feeling, because if I would think about the authentic feeling, probably this person is very angry, but okay, this is, racket, that's the way it works. The other person, meantime, has gone off and goes, I always have to do everything around here, belief about self. Nobody ever takes care of me, belief about others. Life is lonely, belief about in the world or life, I'm exaggerating. I'm doing this a bit like clowning, but it is a very deep and sensitive area. The thing is, people have to recognize that they set up games to end up with their payoff, because the payoff is something you've created very early on in life It's like your conclusion about life when you're very young. And in some ways, even though the environment changes, your relationship patterns have a potential to change, you actually keep repeating this because it's something you know, and it's something you've trained for all your life. So it's, in a way, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy almost, this non-problem solving pattern of behavior. But we'll talk more about that when we talk about scripts. Anyway, when we enter relationships, you have the potential to change, but very often we choose people who potentially can play a role in our games. If you're very lucky in a relationship, you become conscious of the games you play, and then you talk about it, and then you decide, well, you can still do them, but at least you know why you're doing them and what the underlying need is. Because every known payoff hides an underlying need. That's very, very important to remember. The person who storms off and says, nobody really loves me, you can think about what they really need. What they need is some form of nurturing where they actually have the feeling that they're held. And the other person storming off and goes, I always have to do everything here. What they really need is co-responsibility, but they've never learned it. And so they also choose a partner who exports responsibility. That's the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. Everybody plays games. Everybody does it. I've been in transactional analysis for 35 years. I also still play games. And then sometimes I go, oh, I'm a transactional analyst. I shouldn't be doing this. I should know, that this is the pattern that's there. Everybody does it because no matter how much work you do on yourself, your first reaction, your really limbic reaction that you learned very young will always stay with you. What you can do through coaching or through therapy or through learning TA is you learn a very, very quick second reaction so that you can recoup and do something that's actually in relationship and in the relationship in the here and now, instead of repeating the past. We talk about games as a way to redefine reality. So it's also a way to repeat your patterns. But it's unconscious. That's the other thing that's really important to remember. Because if you don't believe it's unconscious, then it's a way to blame people. And if you understand that games are unconscious, it's an opening to compassion, to understand that people are fragile and they're repeating patterns because they haven't experienced other ways of living. This person storming off and going, I've never, nobody ever loves me. It's really, your heart should soften with that. Of course, that's not the way a game works when you're in it. Your heart hardens and you forget there are options. We talk about degrees of games. So the first degree of a game is something that's mildly embarrassing, like, oh, I had a discussion about the trash that was going out, blah, 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 and everybody laughs a bit. Oh, I know that kind of discussion. The second degree game is more embarrassing. You probably wouldn't share it with your friends. And so it's something that's more repetitive and more vicious, I guess. People talk about maybe their marriage, where they always repeat the same kind of fight they have. But then after a while, your friends don't really want to hear it and you don't want to tell it. And it becomes something that's so ingrained that it's a bit icky. That's second degree game. Third degree game, Berne said, always ends up in court or in the hospital. And so that's quite serious. Actually, in actual fact, my belief is that within organizations, games, psychological games or gaming is one of the things that cost organizations the most money. Because when people get into these patterns, for instance, power games, we talk about power games, it's really a way to repeat a pattern and not think innovatively about new solutions.